A desperate herbal trader ventured into the forest one faithful day, searching for anything that could turn his failing business around. What he found instead was something far more dangerous than he could ever have imagined. Obi, with his greed clouding his judgment, discovered a hidden waterfall where a golden-haired mermaid named Esh combed her hair with a magical moonstone comb. Mesmerized by her beauty and desperate for success, he stole a single lock of her hair, unaware of the consequences his actions would unleash. The very next day, things began to change, but not in the way he expected. The village, once full of life, began to wither, and something ancient and powerful stirred beneath the surface of the world. As Obi's fortunes rose, the land itself began to suffer, and a quiet, hidden force seemed to be watching, waiting. This is the story of how a man's greed and a mermaid's sorrow became the spark for a journey of redemption, mystery, and the discovery of a truth that would change everything. Before we dive deeper into this epic tale, we'd love to know where you are watching from. Tell us in the comments. And if you love high-stakes fantasy filled with mermaids, magic, love, and sacrifice, don't just watch, be part of our adventure. Like this video, share it with someone who loves powerful stories, and hit that subscribe button, because tomorrow, we've got an extra special story lined up for you, and trust me, you won't want to miss it. The moon hung low in the sky, round and golden like a calabash filled with honey. Crickets sang in the tall grass, and the trees of Zuba whispered secrets to one another in the wind. But deep inside the jungle, far from the chatter of the village, something strange was happening. Obi crouched behind a wall of leafy bushes, heart pounding like a talking drum. He had followed a path no one else dared to walk. It twisted like a snake through dark trees and wet vines, past old termite mounds and stones shaped like skulls. Baba Nuru, the oldest man in Zuba, had warned him, no one goes near the hidden falls. That place belongs to the spirits. The river guards its secrets with teeth. But Obi had ignored the old man's words. His hands were blistered from climbing. His sandals were torn, and his small sack of herbs had long since fallen off his back. But he didn't care. Because there, just a few steps ahead, was the secret that would change everything. A waterfall glowed under the moonlight. It was not big or loud. It was gentle, soft like a lullaby. The water flowed down the rocks like melted silver, falling into a round pool as smooth as glass. Fireflies danced in the air. The trees surrounding it bent inward, as if bowing to something sacred. And right in the center of it all, perched on a flat rock, sat a girl. No, not a girl. A creature. A being of magic. Obi's breath caught in his throat. She had long, glowing hair that shimmered like gold, with strands that sparkled when they moved. Her skin was the color of river stones, smooth, glowing faintly in the moonlight. She wore a wrap of woven water lilies, and her eyes were wide and glowing, like two full moons. In her hands, she held a comb made of something Obi had never seen before, pale, blue, and glowing like the evening star. She combed her golden hair slowly, singing a song in a voice soft as rain. It wasn't any language Obi knew, but it made the hairs on his arms stand up. His mouth went dry. That's her. The mermaid. The river witch of old stories. The one the hunter spoke of in low voices by the fire. The spirit of the waterfall. She is real. Obi watched her, hiding, unable to move. Something inside him wanted to run. Another part, hungrier, colder, told him to stay. That's when he saw it. As the mermaid combed her hair, a single glowing strand floated loose. It drifted gently in the air before landing on a rock beside her. She didn't notice. She kept singing, lost in her dreamlike song. Obi's eyes locked onto that strand. It glowed like a firefly. It pulsed with light, as if it were alive. He remembered what Baba Nuru once said long ago during a storm, a mermaid's hair is pure power. One strand can heal a dying man. Two can bring gold to your doorstep. Obi's herbal business was failing. His mother was sick. The other traders in Zuba laughed at him. He had no money, no hope. And now, right in front of him, was a glowing key to a new life. His fingers curled. Sweat trickled down his back. "Don't do it," something deep inside whispered. But his feet moved before he could stop them. Silent as a cat, Obi crept around the edge of the pool. The mermaid had her back turned. She sang louder now, raising her voice with the wind. The comb in her hand sparkled with every stroke. He got closer. One more step. His heart beat so loudly he feared it would give him away. Then, swift like a lizard, he grabbed the glowing hair from the rock. The moment his fingers closed around it, the forest changed. The trees stopped whispering. The waterfall went quiet. The air turned heavy, like it was holding its breath. Obi didn't wait. He turned and ran. Through branches. Through mud. Thorns scratched his face. A root caught his leg and made him stumble, but he kept going. He ran like something was chasing him, even though nothing did. Not yet. Behind him, the waterfall sang no more. The moon hid behind a cloud. And the mermaid stopped her song. The sky over Zuba was red with morning. Roosters crowed, and smoke rose from kitchen fires. Children ran barefoot along the narrow paths, chasing chickens and shouting songs. But in a corner of the village, inside a crooked little hut with a cracked window, something strange was happening. Obi knelt beside a clay pot, whispering a prayer under his breath. The golden strand of mermaid hair was inside a small calabash bowl, coiled like a snake. Even now, it pulsed with a soft light, warm and alive. He had wrapped it carefully in a piece of white cloth, the same cloth he used for his best herbs, and placed it near his mother's sleeping mat. "Mama," he whispered. His mother lay still, her chest rising and falling. She had been sick for many moons, too weak to walk, too tired to eat. The local healers had tried everything: bitter bark, smoke herbs, rain leaf tea. Nothing worked. Her breath had grown shallow, like wind slipping through a cracked door. Obi dipped his fingers into water from the gourd, whispered the name of the river god under his breath, just in case, and brushed the wetness over her forehead. Then he unwrapped the cloth, careful not to let the glowing strand touch his bare skin. He whispered, "Please, just help her. Just her. Then I'll be good. I'll return you." But even he didn't believe that last part. He dipped the strand into the water. The moment it touched the liquid, the calabash trembled. The water shimmered and turned pale gold, like liquid sunlight. It gave off a soft scent, sweet and strange, like fresh rain and crushed petals. Obi stared, frozen. Then, his mother stirred. Her eyes fluttered open. Her lips moved. "Obi." He dropped the bowl in shock. "Mama." She sat up slowly, blinking. Why is it so bright in here?" Obi grabbed her hands. They were no longer cold. "Mama, you're awake. You're better," he cried. She looked at him, confused but smiling. "Did you bring me river leaf tea?" Obi laughed and sobbed at once. He held her tightly, his heart thudding like the village drum. Outside, the morning wind picked up, and the scent of wildflowers drifted in. A goat bleated in the distance. The sun was rising fast. And so was Obi's luck. By the next market day, everyone in Zuba was talking about Obi. "Have you seen his stall?" whispered old Deka, the fish seller. "His herbs smell like rain and mango." "My daughter had fever," said Mama Tewa. He gave her just one leaf. By evening, she was dancing. "Obi must have found a spirit tree," someone murmured. Or maybe the forest goddess blessed him. His little table, once ignored and laughed at, was now surrounded. Villagers came from across the river, from hills beyond the cocoa farms, even from the ironsmiths of Bantu Ridge. They came carrying gourds, clay pots, and bundles of cloth to trade. They came with sick babies, swollen ankles, stubborn rashes, and broken hearts. And Obi. He smiled and served them all, his eyes calm, his voice gentle. No one knew the truth. No one knew that hidden beneath his bed, wrapped in that same cloth, the golden hair still pulsed with power. But Obi did. And late at night, when the village slept, he would unwrap it, just to stare. Just to feel its warm light on his skin. One night, as he held it in his palm, he whispered, "Thank you. Just a little more. Just enough to build Mama a better house. Then I'll return you. I promise." But the hair said nothing. It only glowed. Far away, deep in the jungle, the waterfall no longer sang. The forest had grown quiet. The birds no longer visited the pool. Even the frogs had stopped their songs. Esh sat on her rock, her moonstone comb resting beside her. Her hair, once thick and golden, now hung limp at the edges. A strange ache pressed against her chest. Not a wound. Not pain. But something missing. She dipped her fingers into the pool. The water didn't glow. Her heart tightened. She combed her hair slowly, her eyes searching the trees. Something is wrong. She whispered a song, calling the river winds. They came, soft and slow. She asked them, "Who took what was mine?" The winds whispered back, "A man with empty hands and hungry eyes." Esh's eyes darkened. She stood slowly, her hair falling around her like silk. Her fingers trembled, not with anger, but with confusion. "Amen," she said aloud. "But why?" The wind rustled the trees. And in her heart, something else stirred, something new. Not anger. Not sorrow. Curiosity. The village of Zuba had never seen a stranger quite like her. She came just before sunset, walking barefoot on the dusty road that led from the jungle. Her wrapper was the color of the river at dawn, silver blue and soft, with tiny beads that shimmered like water droplets. Her hair was tied in a single long braid, covered with a plain cloth, and her eyes, oh, her eyes. The first person to see her was little Dammy, the goat boy. He stood with a stick in one hand and wide eyes. The woman smiled at him, her voice smooth like palm wine. "Which way to the market, child?" Dammy pointed, mouth open. "Oh, over there, by the big tree. The one with drums carved on it." She touched his head gently. "Thank you." As she walked past, the goat stopped chewing. The wind grew soft. Even the dust beneath her feet seemed to follow her steps, as if the earth itself knew she did not belong. Esh had never walked among humans before. She had seen them from behind trees, heard them laugh and cry, watched them dance by firelight. But now, here she was, in their world. The clothes itched her skin. The sounds were loud and strange. But more than anything, the pull of her missing power was stronger here. She followed it like a scent in the air. She passed the yam seller, the weaver, and the blacksmith hammering his iron. The scent grew stronger near the herb stalls. Her feet stopped. Then she saw him. Obi. He was laughing, handing out small leaves wrapped in cloth. His hair was tied back. His wrapper, though simple, was clean. There was a calm glow in his eyes, like someone who had found a treasure he thought he'd never touch. Esh narrowed her eyes. The light, her light, was all around him. Faint but clear. In his smile, in the hands he used to crush herbs, in the jar of water beside him. He was the one. Yet as she looked at him, something odd happened. Her anger melted, just a little. Because something about the way he gently touched an old woman's hand, something about how he wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his palm, made her heart stir. No. She shook her head. He stole from you. He must pay. But still, she stepped forward. Obi felt the change before he saw her. It was like a breeze passing through the market, gentle, quiet, but powerful. His fingers paused above a bowl of dried bark. Then he looked up. And his breath caught. There she was, standing in front of his stall like she had stepped out of a dream. Her wrapper sparkled faintly in the light. Her skin looked like it had been kissed by river mist. And her eyes, they made his heart beat loud in his ears. "Good evening," she said, her voice low and sweet. "Do you sell herbs for troubled sleep?" Obi nodded too quickly. Yes, I do." He scrambled to grab a bundle. "Here. This one is called Dream Leaf. You boil it and drink the water before bed." She took the bundle slowly, her fingers brushing his. He flinched. The warmth was familiar. She looked at him for a long moment. "Thank you." "What's your name?" he asked, surprised by his own boldness. The woman smiled gently. "Esh." Obi blinked. The name settled into his heart like a seed falling into soft earth. "I'm Obi," he said. She tilted her head. "I know." His stomach turned. You do." She smiled again. "The village speaks of you. You're the healer who brought your mother back from the edge of the spirit world." Obi laughed nervously, rubbing the back of his neck. "Ah, yes. Just lucky, I guess." Esh's eyes stayed on his. "Luck is a funny thing." She turned and walked away, leaving Obi staring, confused but enchanted. And behind her, the faint scent of rain and river lilies lingered in the air. That night, Obi couldn't sleep. He turned from side to side on his mat, his mind spinning like a calabash in the river. Esh. Who was she, really? Why did her voice feel like a song he had forgotten? And most importantly, how did she make him feel both warm and afraid? The golden hair beneath his bed pulsed softly. He reached for it, then stopped. His hands trembled. "I should have returned it," he whispered. "But how could I, when Mama was sick? When the stall was empty?" He sat in silence, staring at the moonlight on the floor. In the distance, he heard a night bird cry. A cold wind blew through the window. And for the first time in weeks, the glow of the hair didn't comfort him. The rains came late that year. Dark clouds would gather, growling with thunder, but not a single drop would fall. The air stayed heavy and hot, and the people of Zuba began to whisper. "Why is the sky so angry? Did someone offend the gods? Even the river is shrinking." But Obi barely noticed. His days had taken a strange turn. Every morning, just after he opened his stall, she would appear. Esh. Her feet made no sound on the dusty path. Her wrapper always seemed freshly washed, her smile soft but distant. She never bought the same thing twice. One day it was bark for fever. The next, leaves for sore muscles. Another time, she simply asked for palm oil mixed with ash and kola nut. Obi didn't care what she bought. He would have given her the whole stall if she asked. They began to talk. At first, it was short and polite. "How is your mother?" "She is better." "Thank you." But slowly, the words grew. They talked about everything. Birds. Stories. The silly way old man Bakir chased goats from his yam farm. Esh laughed when Obi imitated the goats' May. One afternoon, she asked, "Why do you sell herbs?" Obi looked up from grinding dried roots. "My father was a trader. But he didn't care for herbs. He wanted gold, spices, things with shine. He died poor." He looked down, voice lower. "But my mother, she taught me which leaves healed and which bark to avoid. She had nothing, but she gave her time to anyone who was sick. I guess I wanted to help people, like her." Esh watched him carefully. "Would you still help people," she asked, "if it brought you no gain?" Obi paused. "I want to say yes. But I don't know." She smiled. "At least you're honest." They sat in silence. The air smelled of dry earth and waiting rain. Then, a soft rumble rolled across the sky. A single drop of rain hit the wooden counter between them. Then another. Esh looked up. Her eyes sparkled. Obi grinned. "It's about time." Suddenly, the clouds released their weight, and the rain fell in fat, joyful drops. The market scattered with people running for shelter. But Esh didn't move. She stepped into the rain, lifting her face to the sky. Her wrapper clung to her, beads glistening. Her hair loosened from the cloth and spilled in dark waves down her back. She closed her eyes, spun once, and laughed. Obi watched, heart beating like a talking drum. She looked like magic. Like something that didn't belong to the world, yet had chosen to stay. He took a step forward. "Esh." She opened her eyes and smiled. "Come dance in the rain, Obi." He hesitated. Then he laughed and ran into the downpour. They danced like children, spinning and slipping, splashing through puddles. Their laughter rose above the thunder. For a moment, time stood still. And the golden hair beneath Obi's bed stopped glowing. Late that night, Obi returned home soaked to the bone and full of strange joy. He hung his wet wrapper by the fire and reached for the clay pot under his bed. Inside was the golden hair. He hadn't touched it in days. But something tugged at him. A whisper in the corner of his mind. When he lifted the lid, the light was faint. Weaker. It no longer pulsed like a heartbeat. Obi stared at it. Was it fading? He touched the strand with one finger. It felt cold. Not smooth and warm like before. A breeze moved through the hut, though all the windows were shut. Then he heard it. A voice, not from outside, not from inside, but from within. "The river remembers." Obi's hand jerked back. "Who said that?" The voice came again, softer, sadder. "The gift was stolen. The price has not been paid." Obi stood quickly and dropped the pot. The lid shattered. The hair tumbled out like golden threads of lightning, then faded, dimmed, and went still. He stared at it, heart pounding. "What have I done?" he whispered. The river that once sang through Zuba had gone quiet. No more laughter from children swimming in the shallows. No more fishermen casting their nets with whistles and songs. No more women bending to wash clothes and gossip about village news. The stream had shrunk to a thin, muddy thread. Frogs croaked from the reeds, confused. Fish flopped in the wet sand, gasping for water. People gathered at the riverbank, whispering in tight clusters. "Look at it," one woman said, clutching her baby. "Even the birds won't drink." "The river spirits are angry," muttered old Pa Olamide, the village flute maker. "This isn't just weather. This is punishment." Children were forbidden to fetch water. Buckets returned home with more mud than liquid. That afternoon, a small boy named Kobe, no more than 6 years old, drank from the river before anyone could stop him. By evening, he had a fever. He shook and sweated in his mother's arms, his skin burning hot like firewood. His lips cracked. His eyes rolled back. He called for his grandmother, who had died 2 seasons ago. The village priestess, Mama Lala, was summoned at once. She was a tall, thin woman with skin like roasted yam peel and a voice like distant thunder. Her white beads clicked as she entered Kobe's hut, her feet bare and firm against the cool mud floor. She placed her hand on Kobe's head. Closed her eyes. Then she whispered in a tongue older than the hills. When she opened her eyes, she turned to the villagers crowded outside the hut. Her voice was clear. Strong. heavy with warning. The river is cursed. Gasps filled the air. What does that mean? Someone shouted. Mama Lala lifted one finger. Someone has angered the spirits of water. This is not just about rain. It is about balance. Who would do such a thing? Cried a mother. We all give offerings. We all pour palm wine at the river shrine. Mama Lala looked toward the horizon, toward the fading sun. This curse came from a broken heart and a stolen gift. Obi, who had been standing at the edge of the crowd, felt his chest squeeze. His stomach turned. A stolen gift. He turned and walked away quickly before anyone could see his face. Esh woke up with dry lips. Her throat ached. She blinked slowly, sitting on the floor of her small hut behind the market. Her legs felt heavy. Her hair, it didn't shine the way it used to. She stood and walked to the clay pot by the door. It was half full. She dipped her hand in. The water was warm. Not cool like it should be. She looked into the mirror shard beside the window. The face that looked back was still hers, but dull. Her skin looked human. And her dreams had changed. The night before, she had wandered through a dry ocean floor. Coral skeletons. Cracked sand. Dead fish. She had called out to her sisters in the deep, but no voices answered. The Sea Queen, Nyara, who once spoke to her in dreams, had been silent for days. Esh touched her hair gently. A part of her was missing. She didn't know how. She didn't know why. But she could feel it, like a song half forgotten. She closed her eyes and whispered, "Have I stayed too long among humans?" A gust of wind blew through the window. Her hair lifted slightly. The beads at the ends clicked softly. Then, from the floor below her, a crack appeared in the clay. The earth was drying. Even the soil knew something was wrong. Night had fallen in Zuba, but the moon hid behind thick clouds. The stars, once clear and proud above the village, now seemed scattered, as if even the sky was uneasy. Obi crept along the narrow path behind the marketplace, careful not to step on dry branches. He wore a faded brown wrapper and a scarf around his head, hoping no one would recognize him. His hands trembled. Sweat rolled down his back even though the air was cold. He had not slept in days. He had not spoken a word to Esh since the river began to dry. Her eyes haunted him. Her laughter, her smile, each moment they had shared now twisted with guilt. He had stolen from her. He had watched her glow fade, even as his success grew. But now, that glow was gone. The herbs in his stall no longer shimmered. The moonstone comb hidden in his roof had stopped humming. The magic was dying. And so was Esh. He reached the old hut near the edge of the village. A red calabash sat outside the door, filled with white chalk and cowrie shells. Smoke curled from a small fire inside. He knocked once. Silence. He knocked again, softer. A voice answered, low and slow. Enter if your spirit is clean. Stay away if your heart carries lies. Obi swallowed hard, then stepped inside. The room was dark, lit only by 3 oil lamps. Dried herbs hung from the ceiling like sleeping bats. A clay drum sat in the corner, covered in ash. The air was thick with incense and whispers. At the center of the room sat Mama Lala, the priestess. She wore a robe of indigo and white, and her gray hair was tied in long ropes behind her head. A staff carved with snake and fish symbols rested on her lap. Her eyes, deep and wise, glowed faintly in the low light. She didn't look up. You came too late, Obi. He froze. How did you know it was me? She raised her hand slowly, pointing at a nearby calabash. Inside, water rippled without touch. Your guilt follows you like smoke. Even the spirits can smell it. Obi fell to his knees. Please. I need your help. Mama Lala looked at him finally, her gaze heavy like a mountain. You are not sick. You are not cursed. So why have you come? Obi opened his mouth, then closed it. His tongue felt like stone. He couldn't say the truth. He couldn't tell her about the mermaid. About the lock of golden hair wrapped in leather under his sleeping mat. About the night at the hidden waterfall. Please, he whispered. The river is dying. I want to help. Mama Lala narrowed her eyes. The river is dying because someone took what was not theirs. A gift of the deep. A treasure of spirit. Obi clenched his fists. I didn't mean to harm anyone. You did, she said sharply. And now the land is thirsting for justice. Silence filled the room. Then Mama Lala rose. She walked to a wooden shelf, where she pulled down a small leather bag tied with black string. She tossed it to him. Inside are 3 stones. Each will show you a path. The first will lead you to truth. The second to pain. The third, her voice softened, the third will lead you to a choice. Obi caught the bag, his hands shaking. Where do I go? To the wailing tree, beyond the old yam fields. There, your journey will begin. Obi opened the bag. 3 stones, red, white, and black, glowed faintly inside. He looked up, his voice barely a whisper. What happens if I fail? Mama Lala's eyes darkened. Then the river will die. And Zubo will become a land of dust. And the woman you love will fade into nothing. The night air in Zubo was cool, but the weight of Obi's guilt felt heavier than any heat he had ever known. He clutched the leather bag tightly in his hands, his fingers trembling around the 3 stones. The soft glow from the moon seemed almost mocking as he made his way through the village, avoiding the well-worn paths, hoping no one would see him leave. Behind him, the distant sound of dry leaves rustling in the wind reminded him of the desert his land was becoming. The crops had started wilting days ago. The children no longer laughed at the riverbank. Only silence remained. Forgive me, Esh, Obi whispered under his breath, his voice lost in the cold wind. He was walking into the unknown, seeking redemption for something he wasn't sure he could ever undo. The wailing tree stood far outside the village, where the yam fields ended and the land began to soften into wild grass and thorns. He had heard old stories of this tree, told by elders who spoke of it with both awe and fear. Its bark was said to be as black as the midnight sky, and its leaves made a sound like the whispers of the dead. It was a place where the boundary between the living and the spirit world grew thin. Obi moved quickly, driven by something beyond his own will. The stones in his pocket seemed to pulse with energy, a quiet hum that only grew louder the closer he got to the tree. His heart pounded in his chest, louder than the wind, louder than his footsteps. As he approached, a sense of dread swept over him. Something was watching. And then, there it was, the wailing tree. It stood alone on a hill, its branches twisted and gnarled, reaching out like skeletal hands. A low, mournful cry rose from the tree, like a child lost in the night. Obi swallowed hard and approached it. The tree's leaves shimmered in the dark, as though they were alive, vibrating with an otherworldly energy. He felt the air around him grow thick, like he was breathing in smoke or fog. The cry from the tree grew louder, and he saw that the ground beneath it was covered in strange, dark marks. The wailing tree was calling. Obi knelt beside the tree, his fingers brushing against the bark. It felt hot, almost burning, but he held on. The hum of the stones in his pocket increased, and he knew that this was the place where he would face the truth. Take the first stone, a voice whispered, so faint that Obi wasn't sure if it had come from the tree or from within himself. He pulled out the red stone, its smooth surface warm to the touch. Holding it tightly, he closed his eyes. Suddenly, the world around him shifted. He was no longer in the dark field. He was standing at the riverbank, but it was not the same river. The water shimmered in the pale moonlight, and the trees along the banks were lush, their leaves bright and full of life. There were people here, too, children laughing, women washing clothes, and men casting their nets into the water. Esh was there. She stood by the river, combing her golden hair with the moonstone comb, the same comb that Obi had stolen. She smiled as she worked, her face serene and beautiful, but Obi could feel the faint sadness in her eyes. "Esh," he whispered, stepping forward, but his voice was swallowed by the sound of rushing water. He could not reach her. No matter how much he tried, the river seemed to push him back, pulling him away from her. As he stood there, helpless, the river began to change. The water grew darker, swirling and churning as if it were alive. The once calm surface erupted in violent waves, crashing against the shore, tearing away the trees. The laughter and voices of the villagers turned into screams. Obi's heart clenched as he watched the river rise higher and higher, swallowing everything in its path. Esh's form began to fade, her golden hair dissolving into the waves. She reached out toward Obi, but she was too far away. He could see the pain in her eyes as the river pulled her under, as though it were dragging her into its depths, never to return. "No!" Obi cried, but his voice was drowned by the roaring water. He reached out, but the current was too strong. He was pulled back, his feet slipping on the wet rocks. The river claimed everything, swallowing the village, the trees, and Esh's form. The red stone in his hand began to burn, and with a sharp cry, Obi dropped it. Obi gasped and opened his eyes. He was back at the wailing tree, his breath coming in ragged gasps. The tree's wails filled his ears again, louder this time. The ground beneath him trembled as though the earth itself was mourning. "You have seen the truth," the voice whispered again. The river was angry. It had been broken, and so had the spirit who protected it. Obi understood now. The magic of the river, the land, and Esh had been stolen by his greed. He had taken something that did not belong to him, and in doing so, he had caused harm he could not undo. His heart felt heavy. The guilt weighed on him like 1,000 stones. Mama Lala's warning echoed in his mind, "The first stone will lead you to truth." Obi turned his hand and pulled out the white stone. It was smoother, colder than the red one, but as soon as he touched it, the air around him shifted again. The white stone in Obi's hand pulsed, cold against his skin, and the world around him began to shift once more. This time, there was no rushing wind or sudden cold. Instead, the air became still, unnervingly quiet, as though the very earth had stopped breathing. He blinked, and the world around him stretched and twisted. The wailing tree vanished, and Obi found himself standing in a place that felt both strange and familiar. The sky was a deep, swirling purple, and the ground beneath his feet seemed to ripple like water. It wasn't solid. It wasn't land. It felt like he was standing between worlds. Voices, soft and hollow, echoed from every direction. He couldn't see where they came from, but he could hear them clearly, whispers of pain, regret, and sorrow. "Where am I?" Obi whispered to no one in particular, his voice barely rising above the murmurs that surrounded him. A soft light appeared in front of him, and as it grew, the shape of a figure emerged from the haze. It was a woman, her form luminous, like she was made of stardust. Her features were sharp, her eyes glowing with an inner fire that felt both comforting and terrifying at the same time. "You've entered the land of spirits," she said, her voice echoing in the air. "Here, the weight of your heart will be felt. The guilt you carry has led you here." Obi swallowed hard. The air felt thick with something ancient, something powerful. His heart beat faster in his chest as the full force of his guilt came crashing over him. I didn't mean to cause all of this," Obi said, his voice shaking. "I only wanted to succeed. To survive." The woman's eyes softened, but her expression remained solemn. "Survival is a basic need," she said, "but greed is a poison that grows inside a man. You've chosen to take what was not yours, and now the land, the spirits, and the river are suffering. Obi's throat tightened. He knew the truth of her words. It was not survival that had driven him, but something darker, something deeper, his own desire for more. More wealth, more success. And in the process, he had taken what was never meant for him. But, what can I do now? Obi asked. I have to fix this. I must find Esh, and make things right. The woman nodded slowly. Your path will be long and difficult. But first, you must face the pain you caused. Only then can you begin to understand the depth of what you've done. She waved her hand, and suddenly, the landscape shifted once again. The soft purple haze turned into a vast desert of cracked earth. The ground beneath Obi's feet crumbled away, and he found himself standing at the edge of a great chasm. The edges of the canyon were jagged, and deep below, Obi could hear the sounds of rushing water, but no water could be seen. It is the river, the woman said softly. You took from it, and now it lies in ruin. Below you is the spirit of the river itself, drowning in its own sorrow. It was once strong and free, flowing with life. But now, it is a shadow of itself. Obi stepped closer to the edge, peering into the darkness below. The water was barely a trickle, its surface dark and murky. He could feel the weight of the river's grief pulling at his heart. I'm sorry, Obi whispered, his voice barely audible. I didn't understand. I didn't realize what I was doing. The woman remained silent, her gaze never leaving him. After a long pause, she spoke again, her voice quiet but filled with the weight of eternity. To understand the depth of your actions, you must see the pain you have caused. Only then will you find the strength to undo what has been done. Obi turned away from the chasm and looked back at the woman, who seemed to shimmer like a fading star. Where do I go now? He asked, his voice filled with desperation. You must journey deeper into the spirit world, she said. You must face the choices you made, one by one, and see them for what they truly are. Only then can you begin to heal. The woman raised her hand, and a door of light appeared before Obi, glowing with a soft, golden radiance. Go, Obi, she said, her voice gentle now. Your journey is just beginning. Obi nodded, the weight of her words pressing down on him. He stepped through the door, feeling the warmth of the light wrap around him like a cloak. He found himself standing once again, but this time in a new place, a thick, dense forest. The trees towered above him, their trunks covered in strange, glowing vines. The air was thick with the scent of earth and moss, and the ground was soft beneath his feet. He could hear the rustling of unseen creatures in the underbrush. This place feels familiar, Obi murmured to himself. Suddenly, a low growl echoed through the trees. He spun around, his heart racing. From the shadows emerged a large creature, its eyes glowing like fire, its body covered in dark fur. It was a spirit animal, a guardian of the forest. You have come, the creature rumbled, its voice deep and thunderous. But what is it you seek? Obi took a deep breath, trying to steady himself. I seek redemption, he said. I have wronged the river and the spirit of Esh. I must make things right. The creature stepped closer, its fiery eyes narrowing as it circled Obi. Redemption is not so easily earned. You have much to atone for. Obi nodded. I understand. But I must try. I cannot live with the knowledge of what I have done. The creature stopped in front of him, its gaze piercing into Obi's soul. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. Finally, the creature nodded. Very well. Your journey continues. But be warned, each step you take will lead you closer to the truth. And the truth may not be what you wish to find. Obi swallowed hard. I am ready. The creature stepped aside, revealing a narrow path that wound deeper into the forest. Obi took a deep breath and began to walk. Obi's feet crunched softly on the damp earth as he walked deeper into the forest. The towering trees seemed to whisper around him, their ancient branches swaying in the breeze. Each step he took felt heavier than the last, the weight of his guilt pressing on him like an invisible burden. The forest grew darker with each passing moment, and Obi felt as if the shadows were closing in on him. The path ahead became narrower, winding between dense thickets of vines and thick underbrush. The air was thick with the scent of damp moss, and the sound of distant flowing water reached his ears. It was a sound he had come to dread, because he knew what that water meant. He had come this far in search of redemption, but the closer he got to the spirit of the river, the more uncertain he became. What if he couldn't undo the damage he had caused? What if Esh never forgave him? The questions swirled in his mind, but he silenced them with a steady breath. Ahead, the forest opened up into a small clearing. At the center of the clearing was a pool of water, shimmering with a soft, ethereal light. The water was dark, almost black, but it reflected the glowing vines above as if it were alive with secrets. Obi felt drawn to the pool, but as he approached, the ground beneath his feet began to tremble. A low, rumbling voice echoed through the trees, vibrating the air around him. "You have come far, Obi," it said, and Obi froze in place. The voice was both gentle and terrifying, like the deep rumble of thunder before a storm. Obi's heart raced. He had heard this voice before. It was the voice of the river itself, the spirit of the waters he had stolen from. "Yes," Obi said, his voice small and shaky, "I've come to ask for forgiveness. I know I have wronged you in the land." The surface of the pool rippled, and the water began to swirl as if something was rising from its depths. A figure began to materialize from the water, her shape slowly taking form. Obi's breath caught in his throat as he recognized her, Esh. But this Esh was different from the one he had seen before. Her golden hair was now dark and tangled, and her once bright eyes were clouded with sorrow. Her form was no longer the radiant mermaid he had fallen in love with. Instead, she seemed like a ghost, her presence filled with pain and sadness. Esh's voice echoed from the depths of the water, and it was full of anguish. "You took from me, Obi. You took my hair, my power, my very life force. And with it, you took the lifeblood of the river." Obi stepped back, his heart pounding in his chest. "Esh, I didn't know. I didn't understand what I was doing. I was desperate. I thought if I had your magic, I could make my life better. I didn't realize it would hurt you. I didn't realize it would hurt the river." Esh's form flickered, like a flame struggling to stay alight. "You did not understand the price of your actions," she said, her voice low and mournful. "You took what was sacred, what was not yours. And now, the river is dying. The land is dying. And so am I." Obi's heart ached as he looked at her, his guilt threatening to swallow him whole. "Please," he whispered. "Tell me what I can do to fix this. I will do anything, anything to make it right." Esh's eyes softened slightly, but the sadness remained. "The damage you have done cannot be undone easily. The magic you stole has already been used, and the river's strength has been drained. But there is one thing you can do." Her voice grew quieter, as though the weight of her words was too much for her to bear. "You must give back what you took." Obi's breath caught. "How? How can I give it back when it is already in the world?" "You must return to the source," Esh replied. "The hair you stole from me is still bound to the earth, to the waters, to the life force of the river. You must find it and return it to the heart of the river. Only then will the balance be restored, and the river will begin to heal." Obi nodded, a sense of determination filling him. "I will do it. I will find it and return it to the river, no matter the cost." Esh's form flickered again, and her eyes seemed to shine with a faint, flickering light. "You have come far, Obi, but this journey is not over. The path ahead will be treacherous. There are forces that will try to stop you. But if you truly wish to make amends, you must press on. The spirit of the river will guide you, but only if your heart is true." With those final words, Esh began to fade into the mist of the water, her form dissolving like smoke. Obi stood still, his heart heavy with the weight of what he had learned. He had taken so much, but now he was given a chance to make it right. But would he be able to find the hair? And would he be able to return it to the river in time? As Esh's spirit disappeared, the forest around him seemed to shift. The trees began to sway, and the ground rumbled beneath his feet once more. The pool of water glowed brighter, and Obi knew that the river's spirit was still watching, still waiting for him to complete his journey. Obi's heart raced as he stood at the edge of the shimmering pool, the last words of Esh echoing in his mind. He had no time to waste. The river's strength had already been drained, and if he didn't act quickly, the land would suffer even more. The drought would continue, the crops would wither, and the villages would starve. He took one last look at the fading mist in the water. "I will make it right, Esh," he whispered to himself. "I swear I will." With a deep breath, Obi turned away from the clearing and followed the faint trail of glowing footprints in the dirt that led deeper into the forest. The forest was thick with dense trees and twisting vines, and the path was difficult to follow. Yet, Obi felt something guiding him, something invisible but powerful, like the whisper of the wind that carried the river's voice. He journeyed for hours, and as the sun dipped low in the sky, the forest grew darker. The shadows of the trees seemed to stretch longer, and the air grew thick with humidity. Obi's feet were sore, and his stomach growled from hunger, but he pressed on. He knew he could not stop. He had to find the hair, and he had to return it to the river before it was too late. Just as the night began to fall, Obi came to a large, ancient tree. Its massive roots twisted up from the ground like great serpents, and its trunk was so wide that it could have taken 10 men to encircle it. At the base of the tree, there was a small, hidden entrance, a crack in the earth that seemed to pulse with a strange energy. Obi hesitated for a moment, then gathered his courage and stepped forward. He crouched down, squeezing through the narrow gap between the roots, and found himself in a small cave beneath the tree. The air was cool and damp, and the walls of the cave shimmered faintly, like they were made of water itself. At the far end of the cave, Obi saw something glowing. It was a soft, golden light, like the light of the moon. As he approached, he realized what it was, a pool of water, much like the one he had seen earlier. But this was not just any water. This water was alive with energy, glowing with a light that seemed to call out to him. Obi kneeled beside the pool, reaching out to touch the surface. The water rippled under his fingers, and a voice spoke, low and melodic, from the depths of the pool. "You seek the hair, don't you?" the voice asked. Obi nodded. "Yes. I need to return what I took. Please, show me where it is." The water swirled, and images appeared on the surface, vivid, glowing images that seemed to dance before his eyes. He saw the golden hair, glowing and radiant, lying at the bottom of the riverbed, tangled among rocks and plants. But the image quickly shifted, and Obi saw something else. He saw a dark, shadowy figure lurking beneath the water, its eyes glowing red with malice. The figure reached out, grasping the hair with dark, twisted hands, pulling it away from the river's depths. Obi recognized the figure. It was the spirit of greed, the one who had been feeding off his desires, leading him astray. He had followed the spirit's whispers, had let his hunger for wealth and power guide him. "No." Obi gasped, standing up. "I can't let it take the hair." The water rippled again, and the voice spoke, more urgently now. "You must hurry. The spirit of greed has taken the hair and is using it to feed its dark power. If you do not act now, it will be too late. The river will die, and so will you." Obi's heart raced. He had no choice now. The spirit had taken what was rightfully Esh's, and he had to stop it before the river's death became permanent. Without another thought, he turned and sprinted from the cave, following the glowing trail that led him deeper into the forest. Obi ran through the forest, his breath heavy in his chest, his feet pounding against the earth. The trees seemed to close in around him, their branches clawing at his arms and legs as he ran. The glowing trail grew brighter, and the air became thick with an ominous energy. He could feel the presence of the spirit of greed growing stronger, its dark influence pressing against him like a weight. At last, he came to a clearing, and there, standing at the edge of a dark river, was the spirit. It was a figure cloaked in shadows, its form shifting like smoke. Its eyes glowed red, and its mouth curled into a wicked grin as it held the golden lock of hair in its grasp. "You should have stayed away, Obi," the spirit hissed, its voice like the rustling of dead leaves. "The hair is mine now. You cannot undo what you have done." Obi took a step forward, his heart pounding in his chest. "No. It's not yours. It belongs to Esh. I took it from her, and I will return it." The spirit laughed, the sound echoing through the clearing. "You think you can stop me? You are nothing but a fool. You have no power over me. The hair is mine, and with it, I will control the river. The land will bow to me." Obi's fists clenched, and for a moment, he felt a surge of fear. But then, he remembered what Esh had said, "If your heart is true, the spirit of the river will guide you." He closed his eyes, reaching deep within himself, finding the strength he had been looking for. He had made mistakes, yes, but he wasn't going to let the spirit of greed destroy everything he cared for. He was going to fight with everything he had left. "Give it back!" Obi shouted, his voice ringing out like a war cry. The spirit sneered, but before it could respond, Obi's hand shot out, his fingers closing around the glowing hair. The moment his fingers touched it, the ground beneath him trembled, and the air crackled with energy. The spirit screeched, its form twisting violently. "No. You cannot take it back." But Obi held on, his grip tightening. The river, the land, and the very earth seemed to respond to his determination. The trees around him began to shake, their branches stretching toward the river. The sky darkened, and a crackling energy filled the air. Obi pulled with all his strength, refusing to let go. And slowly, inch by inch, the golden hair slipped from the spirit's grasp. The spirit's scream echoed through the forest as it was forced to retreat into the shadows, its power fading with the loss of the hair. The air was thick with anticipation as Obi stood at the edge of the river, holding the golden lock of Esh's hair tightly in his hand. He could feel the energy of the land shift, a gentle pulse beneath his feet, as if the earth itself was waiting for him to do the right thing. His chest was tight with guilt, but also with a strange sense of determination. He had done it, he had fought the spirit of greed, returned what he had taken, and now, all he needed was to find Esh. But he knew deep down that there was more to be done. This wasn't the end. As Obi approached the water's edge, the once raging river seemed calmer, as if it too was holding its breath. He kneeled beside the riverbank, gently placing the lock of golden hair into the water. The river rippled, its surface reflecting the glow of the moon above. For a moment, there was nothing but silence. Then, the water began to glow brighter, and from the depths, a figure emerged. It was Esh, her long golden hair flowing around her like a halo of light. Her eyes, still as beautiful as Obi remembered, shimmered with the sadness of the world. Esh gazed at him, her expression unreadable. "You have returned what you took," she said softly. "But is it enough? Can a simple act of returning heal the harm you've caused?" Obi's heart sank. He had hoped that the act of returning the hair would be enough, that it would be the final step in restoring balance. But Esh's words were a reminder of something he had yet to face, his own guilt, his own selfishness. He had taken something precious from her, something that could not simply be undone with a gesture. "Esh," Obi said, his voice hoarse with regret, I was wrong. I thought I could fix my life by taking something that didn't belong to me. I was so blinded by greed, by the promise of success, that I couldn't see the pain I was causing. I took your hair, and in doing so, I hurt you, the land, and the river. I'm sorry. Truly sorry." Esh's eyes softened, but her voice remained firm. "Your apology is not enough, Obi. You cannot simply undo the damage with words. What you took, what you caused, has left a scar. You must face the consequences of your actions. Obi swallowed hard, the weight of her words sinking into his soul. What do I need to do? I will do anything. Tell me what I must do to make it right. Esh paused, her gaze flickering to the horizon where the dark waters met the sky. There is a price to be paid. The land will not heal until you understand the true cost of your greed. You must journey into the spirit world, where you will confront the roots of your selfishness. Only when you face the truth within yourself will the river and the land find peace. Obi felt his stomach churn at the thought of entering the spirit world, but he knew there was no other choice. If he wanted Esh to forgive him, if he wanted to make amends, he had to face the harsh truth of his actions. He nodded solemnly. I'll do it. I'll go. Esh smiled, but there was a sadness in her eyes. The journey will not be easy. You will face trials, trials that will force you to confront the darkest parts of yourself. Only then will you be able to restore balance and heal the river. Without another word, Esh extended her hand, and a soft, glowing light surrounded Obi. The world around him began to blur, and before he knew it, the landscape had shifted. The river and the forest disappeared, replaced by a vast and endless expanse. The air was heavy with a sense of otherworldliness, and the ground beneath him felt soft, like the very fabric of dreams. Obi took a deep breath and began walking forward. The spirit world was a place of shifting shadows and fleeting whispers. As he walked, he saw glimpses of his past, the moments when his greed had controlled him, the times when he had been blinded by his desire for power and wealth. Each vision was a painful reminder of the choices he had made. The first trial came quickly. Obi found himself standing in a vast, empty desert. The sun blazed overhead, and the sand stretched as far as the eye could see. In the distance, he saw a figure, a man, dressed in tattered clothes, walking alone through the desert. The man looked exhausted, his face weary and covered with dust. As Obi approached the man, he felt a strange connection. This man was no stranger to him. It was a version of himself, his younger self, the man he had been before greed had taken hold of him. The younger Obi looked up and met his gaze. "You came," he said quietly. "But you can't fix what's broken. We are both lost in this desert." Obi's heart tightened. "I'm sorry. I didn't realize how far I had gone, how much I had hurt others. I thought I could fix everything, but I see now that I can't. I don't know how to fix the pain I've caused." The younger Obi shook his head. "You can't undo what's already been done. The past is the past. You can only choose what kind of person you want to be now." Obi stood still for a long moment, the weight of his younger self's words pressing against him like the heat of the desert sun. He had spent so long running away from his mistakes, pretending they didn't matter. But here, in the spirit world, he had no choice but to confront them. "I want to be better," Obi said, his voice trembling. "I want to make things right. I want to be the man I was meant to be." The younger Obi nodded slowly. "Then you must walk through this desert. You must leave the past behind and choose a new path, one that is free of greed and selfishness. Only then will you find peace." Obi took a deep breath and began to walk. With each step, the weight of the past seemed to lift from his shoulders. The desert began to fade, replaced by lush green fields and towering mountains. The air grew cooler, and the ground beneath his feet became softer. The air grew cooler, and Obi's feet sank softly into the lush grass beneath him. The desert had faded, replaced by a forest so dense and ancient that the trees seemed to whisper secrets of the past. Their towering branches stretched high above him, their leaves rustling in the breeze, creating a symphony of murmurs. The forest was alive, alive with memories of forgotten souls, old spirits, and ancient forces. Obi's journey had brought him this far, and though the weight of the trials weighed heavy on his shoulders, he knew he could not turn back. Not now. The river still needed healing, and Esh's heart still held a sadness that only his transformation could mend. But the path ahead seemed more uncertain than ever. He took a deep breath, sensing that something in the air was different. It wasn't just the trees or the mist that seemed to swirl through the forest, it was the feeling of being watched. Everywhere he looked, there were eyes that glimmered faintly from the shadows, eyes filled with knowledge, wisdom, and perhaps, something darker. Obi took a cautious step forward. His heart was racing, and with every step, he felt the weight of his choices in the past tugging at his soul. He had been a man driven by greed and ambition, seeking power and wealth above all else. How many times had he made promises to himself that once he had enough, he would be content? Yet, in the end, it was never enough. He had always wanted more. As Obi walked deeper into the forest, the shadows around him began to shift. The air grew heavier, and a strange sense of unease settled over him. He couldn't shake the feeling that he was not alone. Then, out of the shadows, a figure appeared. It was tall and regal, cloaked in deep blue robes that seemed to ripple with an ethereal glow. The figure's face was obscured by a golden mask, and Obi could sense that this was no ordinary spirit. This was a powerful being, one that held dominion over temptation and desire. "You've come far, Obi," the figure said, its voice smooth and mesmerizing, like the sound of a gentle river. "But you have not yet faced your greatest trial." Obi's heart thudded in his chest. "What do you mean? I have already faced so much. I am willing to do whatever it takes to make things right." The figure tilted its head, as if considering Obi's words. "But have you truly changed? Or are you simply running from the consequences of your actions?" Obi's throat tightened. "I want to change. I am not the man I was before." The figure stepped forward, its eyes glowing beneath the golden mask. "The true test is not in saying the right words, Obi. The true test is in your actions, in the choices you make when faced with the temptations of power and wealth. The forest you stand in now is a place of choice. You will face the very desires that once ruled your heart." Obi stood still, his mind racing. He knew that the path ahead was fraught with danger, but he had no idea how much harder the trial would be. This was no longer just about making amends for stealing Esh's hair. This was about confronting the core of who he had been, a man who thought he could control his fate with greed and ambition. As the figure spoke again, the forest around Obi seemed to shift. The trees parted, revealing a beautiful clearing bathed in golden light. In the center of the clearing stood a tall, ancient tree with deep roots that seemed to stretch deep into the earth. Its bark was covered in shimmering symbols, and around its base were piles of glittering treasures, golden necklaces, sparkling gems, and fine silks. "Look at the riches, Obi," the figure said, its voice echoing through the forest. "This is the power you once sought. This is what you believed would bring you happiness, success, and security. You could have it all, everything you ever wanted. All you need to do is take it." Obi's eyes widened as he gazed at the treasure. His heart beat faster. The riches were so beautiful, so inviting. Gold and jewels gleamed under the sunlight, their allure almost hypnotic. He could hear the faint whispers of the spirits around him, urging him to take what was rightfully his. After all, hadn't he worked so hard? Didn't he deserve to be rich and powerful? The temptation was overwhelming. "Don't listen to them, Obi," the figure's voice murmured again, as if sensing his struggle. "You have suffered enough. You've already lost so much. Take the treasure. Take the power. This is your chance to be everything you ever wanted to be." For a moment, Obi's hand twitched toward the pile of glittering treasures. He could already see himself, wealthy, respected, and free from the struggles of his past. It would be so easy to reach out and claim the riches, to feel the weight of the gold in his hands, to know that he was no longer a poor herbal trader from Zuba but a man of great power. But as he reached out, something inside him stopped. His heart skipped a beat, and the image of Esh's face flashed in his mind. The golden-haired mermaid who had shown him kindness when he was too blinded by his own desires to see the truth. The same woman whose sorrow had caused the rivers to run dry, whose pain was a direct result of his own selfish actions. Obi closed his eyes, breathing deeply. He remembered the words Esh had spoken to him, the reminder that love must be freely given, not taken. He thought about how he had once taken from her without any regard for her feelings, her power, or her life. And now, as he stood in this clearing, faced with the very riches that had once consumed him, he realized that he couldn't take any more. Not from her. Not from the land. Not from anyone. He stepped back, his feet sinking into the soft earth. The treasure no longer seemed so enticing. The voice of the figure, however, grew louder, urging him to take what was his. "You are a fool, Obi. This is your last chance. Reject it, and you may never have another." But Obi didn't listen. He turned away from the treasure, shaking his head. "No," he said quietly but firmly. "This is not what I want. Not anymore." The forest around him seemed to hold its breath, waiting. The figure, its mask still glinting, remained silent. For a long moment, there was nothing but the sound of the wind rustling through the trees. And then, the figure spoke again, its voice softer now. "You have passed this trial, Obi. The path ahead is clearer now. But there are still more tests you must face. You must prove to yourself that you can live without the things that once ruled your heart." The figure faded into the shadows, and the forest around Obi began to change again. The temptation of power had passed, but there was more to come. He was closer to Esh now, closer to understanding the true cost of his actions. But there was still much to be done. As Obi continued on his journey, he knew that he could never go back to the man he once was. He had to change, for the sake of the river, for Esh, and for the land that had suffered because of his selfishness. The trials would continue, but he was ready. He had already taken the first step toward redemption. And that was all he could ask for. The forest had shifted once again, and Obi found himself standing at the edge of a dark and misty valley. The sun had disappeared behind a curtain of clouds, leaving the world bathed in a dusky twilight. A chill ran through the air, unlike anything Obi had felt before. The stillness was oppressive, as though the land itself was holding its breath, waiting for him to make his next move. As he stepped forward into the valley, Obi's mind raced. The trials he had faced so far had been difficult, each one testing a different part of him, from his greed to his courage. But this felt different. The atmosphere was heavy with sorrow, and he could sense that this was the final challenge. This was the moment when he would have to face his deepest fears. He walked through the mist, each step making a soft crunch beneath his feet. The mist clung to him like a wet cloak, and the trees around him were twisted and dark, their branches reaching out like hands, desperate to pull him into the shadows. His heart pounded in his chest, and he fought the urge to turn back. But he could not. He had come too far. In the distance, a faint glow flickered in the haze. It was a soft, warm light, and as Obi drew closer, he realized it was coming from a clearing. The mist parted just enough to reveal the clearing, and at its center stood a stone altar. The altar was covered in symbols and markings, old and worn by time. It looked ancient, much older than any structure Obi had seen in his village or even in the farthest reaches of the jungle. Around the altar stood figures, but they were not people. They were shadows, shapes of the past, of spirits long gone. And there, in the center of it all, was Esh. Obi's heart skipped a beat. He had not expected to find her here, in this place of shadows. She stood with her back to him, her golden hair shimmering even in the dim light, flowing as if it had a life of its own. Her figure was still as beautiful as he remembered, but her posture was different. She seemed distant, as if she were lost in thought, disconnected from the world around her. "Esh," Obi whispered, taking a cautious step forward. She turned slowly, her expression unreadable. Her deep blue eyes met his, and for a moment, Obi was sure he saw a flicker of something between sorrow and understanding. She didn't speak at first, but her gaze was heavy, as though she were searching him for something. "You've come far," Esh said, her voice calm but filled with an unspoken weight. "But this journey has no end unless you can face the truth that lies within you." Obi's throat tightened. He took another step, but this time, he stopped himself. He couldn't get too close. Not yet. He was afraid of what he might see in her eyes, afraid of the judgment he knew was coming. "I know what you must think of me," Obi said, his voice cracking with emotion. "I've done terrible things. I took from you, I hurt you. I was selfish and greedy. But I've changed. I don't want power anymore. I only want to make things right." Esh's gaze softened slightly, but there was still a distance between them, an invisible wall that Obi could not break. "You speak of change, but have you truly forgiven yourself?" she asked, her voice like the gentle flow of water, but there was a hard edge to it. "You cannot heal the land, Obi, if you cannot heal your own heart." Obi felt as if a weight had settled on his chest. He had never really stopped to think about that. He had been so focused on fixing what he had broken, so consumed by guilt and the need for redemption, that he had never paused to consider whether he truly forgave himself. Could he? Could he ever forgive himself for the pain he had caused Esh? For the harm he had done to the land, to the rivers, to the people who depended on him? "I don't know how," Obi admitted, his voice barely a whisper. "I don't know how to forgive myself for what I've done. Every time I think about it, I feel like I'm drowning in guilt. I've destroyed so much. I've taken so much." Esh's expression softened further, and she took a step toward him. The air around them seemed to shimmer with the energy of the earth and the rivers. The mist parted slightly, and Obi felt a strange warmth spread through his chest. It was as if the land itself was offering him a chance to heal, to let go of the weight he had been carrying for so long. "Forgiveness is not something that happens overnight, Obi," Esh said gently, her voice as soothing as the soft flow of a river. "It is a process. A journey. You cannot erase the past, but you can change how it shapes you. The truth you must understand is that you are not defined by your mistakes. You are defined by the choices you make from here on out." Obi nodded slowly, his heart still heavy but lightened slightly by her words. He wanted to believe her. He wanted to believe that he could move past the darkness that had consumed him for so long. But how could he ever forgive himself when he had taken something so precious from her? How could he make things right? "The land is thirsty, Obi," Esh continued, her eyes never leaving his. "The rivers run dry because of your actions, because of your greed. You cannot undo the damage with mere words. But you can try to restore what was lost by putting others before yourself. Only then will you know if you have truly changed." A soft wind picked up around them, and Obi's thoughts began to clear. Esh's words echoed in his mind, like ripples in a pond that slowly spread outward. The guilt was still there, but it wasn't all-consuming anymore. Maybe he couldn't change the past, but he could change what he did from this moment forward. "I want to make things right," Obi said firmly, his voice filled with determination. "I want to heal the land, to heal the rivers. I don't know how yet, but I will find a way. I will do whatever it takes to restore what I've taken." Esh's gaze softened even more, and for the first time, Obi saw a glimmer of something that felt like forgiveness, like hope. "I believe you," she said quietly. "But remember, Obi, true change comes from within. You must continue to walk the path of humility, of love, and of sacrifice. Only then will you find the power to restore what was lost." The mist began to clear, and the light around them brightened. Obi took a step forward, closer to Esh, but this time, he didn't reach for her. He simply stood by her side, ready to face whatever came next. And as the clearing around them began to shift, Obi knew that his journey was far from over. The land still needed him. Esh still needed him. And though the road ahead would be long and difficult, he was no longer afraid. He had learned what it meant to truly change, to truly heal. Now, it was time to prove it. Obi stood at the threshold of an ancient grove, its trees towering above him like silent sentinels. The air was thick with the scent of wet earth and moss, and the shadows cast by the gnarled branches seemed to stretch toward him, beckoning him deeper into the heart of the forest. The path before him was narrow, barely wide enough for a single person to walk, but it was clear this was the way he must go. He had no choice but to press on. He had come to seek the ancestors. The elders of his village had spoken of them in hushed tones, spirits who guarded the balance of the world, who held the knowledge of the past and the power to judge the living. The ancestors were not easily appeased, and Obi knew that he would need to offer something more than just his words if he hoped to restore the rivers and prove his transformation. With every step he took, the air grew colder, and the forest seemed to close in around him. The sounds of the outside world faded into silence, and all that remained was the soft rustling of leaves and the distant call of birds he could not see. The path twisted and turned, leading him deeper into the grove until he reached a clearing, a sacred place marked by ancient stones that stood in a circle. In the center of the clearing was a large fire, burning with an otherworldly blue flame. The fire crackled and swirled, as if it had a life of its own. Surrounding the fire were shadowy figures, their forms shifting and changing in the smoke. They were the spirits of the ancestors, and their eyes glowed with an ethereal light, watching Obi closely as he stepped forward. A figure stepped out from the circle of spirits, her presence commanding and regal. She wore a cloak of woven leaves, and her hair was crowned with feathers from the sacred birds of the forest. It was Neka, the eldest of the ancestors, known for her wisdom and her ability to see the hearts of those who sought judgment. "Obi," she said, her voice echoing through the clearing like a soft wind. "You have come to seek forgiveness, but you must first face the truth of your actions. The land is dying, the rivers are dry, and the people suffer. You took something precious, and now you must give something in return." Obi swallowed hard, his throat dry. The weight of his guilt seemed heavier than ever before, and his knees trembled beneath him. He had been prepared for many things on this journey, but facing the ancestors, he had not expected it to be so overwhelming. "I know what I have done," Obi said, his voice barely above a whisper. "I stole from Esh, and I caused the land to wither. I took her hair, thinking it would bring me success, but all it has brought me is sorrow. I am here to ask for your forgiveness, and to ask for the power to restore what I have broken." Neka's eyes narrowed, and she stepped closer to him, her gaze sharp and piercing. "Your words are empty without action, Obi. You say you are sorry, but what are you willing to sacrifice to make things right?" Obi felt a pang of fear in his chest. What could he possibly give up? What could he offer that would be enough to repay the damage he had caused? His heart beat faster as his mind raced for an answer. I will give everything I have," he said, his voice trembling. "I will give up my business, my wealth, my trade. I will live as a simple man, without the greed that once consumed me. I will return to the land, to the rivers, and work to restore them with my own hands. But I need your help, and the help of the spirits, to heal the land and to bring the rivers back." The ancestors did not speak immediately. They circled around him, their forms flickering like shadows, their voices rising in a low hum that Obi could not understand. The fire in the center of the circle burned brighter, and the air grew thick with anticipation. The pressure was unbearable, and Obi felt as if the weight of the entire world was resting on his shoulders. Finally, Neka spoke again, her voice calm but full of power. "The path of redemption is not an easy one, Obi. You must walk it with a pure heart, free from the stain of greed. Only then will the spirits see your sincerity. The land will test you, and the rivers will demand your true sacrifice. Are you willing to face what lies ahead?" Obi took a deep breath, steeling himself for what was to come. He had already come so far, he could not turn back now. "I am ready," he said, his voice steady despite the fear that still gripped him. "I will face whatever comes. I will prove that I have changed." Neka nodded, and with a sweeping gesture, she raised her hand toward the fire. The flames flickered, then suddenly shot up into the sky, turning into a brilliant streak of light that illuminated the entire clearing. The ancestors chanted in unison, their voices growing louder and more powerful, and Obi felt the ground beneath him tremble. A figure stepped out of the fire, glowing with an intense light, Esh. Her golden hair shimmered like sunlight on water, and her eyes glowed with the power of the rivers. She was not the same as before. She was more than just a mermaid now, she was the spirit of the river, the embodiment of the land's sorrow and hope. "Obi," she said, her voice both gentle and firm. "You have come to ask for forgiveness, but you must prove that you are worthy of it. The rivers have been drained, the land has been scorched, and all because of your actions. But you have shown humility, and now you must prove your sacrifice." Obi's heart pounded in his chest. This was it, the moment he had feared. He had to make the ultimate sacrifice. The land, the rivers, the people, everything depended on it. "I am ready," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tell me what I must do." Esh's eyes softened, and for a moment, she seemed almost sad. "To restore the balance, you must give up the one thing you love most, your success, your wealth, your trade. You must leave behind the life you have known and return to the land as one of its humble servants. Only then will the rivers flow again, and the land heal." Obi nodded slowly. He understood now. It wasn't just his words that would restore the land, it was his willingness to let go of everything he had gained through greed, to return to a life of simplicity and humility. He stepped forward, kneeling before Esh and the ancestors, offering his heart and soul in sacrifice. "I give all that I have," he said, his voice filled with both sorrow and resolve. "I give up my past, my wealth, my desire for success. I will walk the path of humility and sacrifice, and I will restore the land." The ancestors and Esh stood in silence, the fire flickering in the center of the clearing. Then, with a final nod from Neka, the ancestors raised their voices in a chant, and the air around Obi seemed to vibrate with the power of their blessing. The ground beneath him shook, and the mist around him began to clear. Obi felt a rush of energy course through him, and for the first time since his journey began, he felt truly free. The rivers would flow again. The land would heal. And Obi, the once greedy herbal trader, would find a new purpose, one that would forever bind him to the earth and the spirits that watched over it. Obi stepped back onto the familiar soil of Zuba, the village that had once been his home. The air, thick with dust and the weight of the ongoing drought, seemed heavier now, more oppressive. It was as if the land itself was waiting for him to make good on the promise he had made to the ancestors and to Esh. The village had not changed much in his absence, but Obi could see the signs of the drought everywhere. The crops were withered, the trees were dry and barren, and the once bustling market square was now eerily quiet, with only a handful of traders trying to sell the little that remained. The people of Zuba had struggled, and they had suffered, but Obi knew they had not yet lost hope. Not entirely. As he walked through the village, he was met with curious stares. Some of the villagers recognized him, but there was no warm welcome, only wary eyes and whispers behind closed doors. Obi had been away for months, and during that time, the village had grown accustomed to a life without him. They had managed without his herbs, his potions, and his promises of prosperity. But even in his absence, the suffering had continued. Now, Obi was back, not as the prosperous herbal trader he once was, but as a man who had left his old life behind. His first stop was the small hut he had once called home. The roof had fallen into disrepair, and the walls were covered in creeping vines, but it was still standing. He knelt before the entrance, placing his hands on the earth, and said a silent prayer to the spirits of the land, thanking them for guiding him on his journey. Inside, the air was thick with dust. His old herbs, jars of oils, and the remnants of his former business lay forgotten on the shelves. There was no time to mourn what he had lost. Obi knew what he needed to do. The land, the rivers, and the people were all suffering, and it was up to him to help restore them. As he worked to clear the clutter from his home, Obi noticed something that made his heart skip a beat, a small, intricately carved box that he had nearly forgotten. It was the same box Esh had given him before she vanished into the earth, when they had first met by the hidden waterfall. Inside the box was a single lock of golden hair, the very hair he had stolen from Esh, the hair that had brought him so much success, and so much pain. The sight of the hair sent a wave of guilt washing over him. He could still remember how he had felt the night he took it, how desperate he had been for success, how willing he had been to take whatever he thought would make him rich. But now, holding the lock of hair in his hands, he saw it for what it truly was, a symbol of his greed, his mistakes, and his journey toward redemption. Obi knew what he had to do. He could not simply keep the hair, even if it had once given him everything he thought he wanted. He had to return it to Esh, to the land, to the rivers, where it truly belonged. It was the final step in his transformation, and the only way to restore balance. With the box in hand, Obi set out toward the river, the very river that had once flowed freely, but now lay dry and barren. He knew it would not be easy to restore the flow of water, but he was no longer afraid. He had faced the spirits, and he had learned the hardest lesson of all, that true power came not from taking, but from giving. As Obi reached the riverbank, he knelt down and placed the box in the water. He spoke softly, almost as if to the river itself, "I return what I have stolen. May the rivers flow again, and may the land heal." For a moment, nothing happened. The air was still, and the river remained dry. But then, as Obi stood there, a strange feeling began to rise in his chest. It was a warmth, a familiar presence, a presence he had not felt in so long. From the depths of the river, a soft glow began to emerge. The light grew brighter, and the water slowly began to stir. Obi watched in awe as the river came to life before his very eyes. The first droplets of water trickled down the riverbed, followed by a gentle flow, then a strong current, until the river was once again full of life. The air was filled with the sweet scent of fresh water, and the dry land began to feel alive once more. Esh's voice echoed through the air, her tone warm and full of understanding. "Obi," she said, "you have done what was needed. The land will heal, the rivers will flow, and the people will prosper. But remember this, true love is not something to be taken. It is a gift to be shared." Obi closed his eyes, feeling the weight of her words settle into his heart. He had learned that love, like the rivers, could not be forced or stolen. It could only flow freely, nurtured by kindness, humility, and respect. As the river continued to flow, Obi felt the weight of his past lift from his shoulders. He knew his journey was far from over. The village still needed him, and there was much work to be done. But for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of peace. He stood up and turned back toward Zuba, ready to begin anew. The road ahead would not be easy, but Obi knew that with the lessons of the past guiding him, he could help restore the land, the rivers, and the people. He was no longer the greedy herbal trader who had stolen from the earth. He was now a man who understood the true meaning of sacrifice, redemption, and love. The sun was setting over Zuba, casting a golden light across the village. The river had come alive again, flowing with fresh water, and the land seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Yet, as Obi walked through the village, he felt a lingering unease. The villagers had seen the miracles unfold before their eyes, but they had not yet forgotten the man he once was, the man who had taken from the earth and betrayed the trust of the river spirits. Obi's first stop was the village square. The once bustling market had quieted in the wake of the drought, but there were still some traders trying to sell what little they had left. Obi approached them slowly, his steps unsure, but he knew he had to face them. He had been away for too long, and the time had come to confront the past. "Obi!" A voice called out from the crowd. It was Akpan, an elder of the village. He was standing near one of the market stalls, his arms crossed and his face set in a stern expression. "So, the prodigal son has returned. You come back now, when the land is healing and the river flows again." Obi stopped in front of him, feeling the weight of Akpan's gaze. "I know I have wronged you all," Obi began, his voice steady but filled with remorse. "I took from the earth, I took from Esh, and I allowed my greed to cloud my judgment. But I am back now, to make things right. I ask for your forgiveness and your help." The crowd fell silent. Some of the villagers murmured among themselves, their expressions ranging from skepticism to hope. Obi could see that they were unsure whether to trust him again. He could hardly blame them. His actions had caused them suffering, and it would take more than a few words to earn their trust. "I've seen the river flow again," Akpan said slowly. "I've seen the land breathe life once more. But what about you, Obi? Are you truly changed? Or are you just here to take more? We've suffered, and you've been gone. What makes you think we can just forgive and forget?" Obi swallowed hard. "I don't expect forgiveness to come easily. I don't expect you to forget. But I am here to prove myself. I've returned the hair to the river, and the land is healing. I want to help rebuild Zuba. I want to work alongside you all to restore what has been lost." There was a long pause as the villagers continued to watch him, the weight of their judgment hanging in the air. Finally, Akpan spoke again, his voice softer but still filled with caution. "You want to help? You'll have to earn it, Obi. There is work to be done, and it will take more than just words to make up for the years of greed and betrayal." Obi nodded, determined. "I am ready. I will work with my hands, and I will do whatever it takes." Akpan looked at him for a long moment, then finally nodded. "We'll see, Obi. We'll see if you've truly changed." That evening, Obi set to work alongside the villagers. The river had begun to flow, but there was still much to be done. The crops had been destroyed in the drought, and many of the fields were barren. The villagers were tired, their spirits worn thin by the hardship they had endured, and they were not eager to put their trust in Obi so easily. Obi spent hours in the fields, digging and planting, helping to restore the crops that had been ravaged by the drought. He worked tirelessly, his hands calloused and worn from the labor, but he did not complain. He knew this was his penance, this was the price he had to pay for what he had done. As the days passed, the villagers began to take notice. Obi did not ask for anything in return. He worked quietly, helping wherever he was needed. He fixed broken fences, repaired tools, and even helped the elders in the village with their daily chores. His actions spoke louder than any words could. One evening, as Obi was working late in the fields, he saw a familiar figure approaching. It was Esh, though this time, she appeared not as a mermaid with golden hair, but as a vision of the river's spirit. Her form shimmered in the fading light, her presence ethereal and gentle, like the flow of the river itself. Obi stood up, his heart racing. "Esh," he whispered, almost afraid to speak her name. "Is it really you?" Esh smiled softly, her eyes full of warmth and understanding. "It is me, Obi. I have been watching you, and I see the change in you. The land is healing, and the people are beginning to believe in you once more. You have done what was needed." Obi's eyes filled with gratitude and sorrow. "I didn't know if I could make it right. But I've tried. I've worked so hard to restore the land, to show them that I'm not the same man I was." "You have proven that," Esh said, her voice like the sound of the river flowing peacefully. "But remember, Obi, the work does not end here. You have learned the value of giving, but now you must teach others. You must help them understand that the river, the land, and the people are all connected. Only by working together can you restore true harmony." Obi nodded, his heart heavy with the weight of her words. "I will, Esh. I promise. I will teach them. I will help them understand." Esh's form began to fade, the light around her dimming like the setting sun. "Remember, Obi, that love is not something to possess. It is something to nurture, to cherish, and to give freely. That is the true magic of the world." And with that, she was gone. The next few weeks were filled with hard work, but Obi did not falter. He spent every day in the fields, teaching the villagers how to care for the land, how to plant and harvest in harmony with nature. Slowly but surely, the village of Zuba began to recover. The crops began to sprout, and the trees began to regain their leaves. The river, once again flowing, provided the water they needed, and the people began to rebuild their homes. But even as the land healed, there was still tension in the air. Not everyone had forgiven Obi, and there were still some who whispered behind his back, wondering if he could truly change. But Obi did not give up. He knew that redemption was not something that could be earned overnight. It would take time and trust. One evening, as Obi sat by the riverbank, looking out over the water, he felt a sense of peace settle over him. He had done everything he could to make things right, and now it was time to wait. The land was healing, and the people were starting to believe in him again. The river flowed, and the crops grew. And in the distance, Obi could see the first signs of rain, small droplets falling from the sky, bringing hope to the land once more. The skies over Zuba were heavy with the promise of a storm. Dark clouds swirled in the distance, and the wind began to pick up. Obi stood at the edge of the river, his heart pounding in his chest. The river, which had been flowing with life, now churned angrily, as if it too sensed the coming disaster. The rain had started to fall in small, sharp drops, but Obi knew that this was just the beginning. A great storm was brewing, one that could destroy everything the village had worked so hard to restore. He could feel the weight of the villagers' expectations pressing on him. They had seen the transformation in the land, the return of the river's flow, but there were still some who remained uncertain of him. Some had forgiven him, but there were others who believed the land's recovery was merely a temporary blessing, one that could quickly fade. But Obi knew the truth. The healing of the land wasn't just about the crops or the river, it was about the people, about working together, and understanding the deep connection between nature and humanity. He had spent the last few weeks teaching the villagers that lesson, but now, with the storm approaching, it was time to put it to the test. The winds howled louder, and Obi could see the villagers gathering in the distance, looking anxiously toward the darkening sky. He made his way toward them, determination in his steps. As he approached, Akpan, the village elder, stepped forward, his face grim. "The storm is coming fast, Obi," Akpan said, his voice strained. "The crops are not fully grown, the water levels are rising, and the riverbanks are already starting to erode. If this storm is as bad as they say, the village will be in grave danger." Obi nodded. "I know, Akpan. But we've prepared for this. We've learned to work with the land, with the river. We have to act together, every one of us. The storm is not just a test of the land, it's a test of us." Akpan's eyes flickered with doubt. "We cannot control the storm, Obi." "How can you be so sure?" Obi met his gaze and said, "We may not control the storm, but we can control how we respond to it. We have worked hard to rebuild this village, and now we must face this challenge together, not as individuals, but as a community." Akpan was silent for a moment, his brow furrowed, before he nodded. "Very well. Let us prepare, then." The villagers worked quickly, reinforcing the riverbanks, clearing paths for water to flow safely, and securing their homes. Obi worked alongside them, his hands moving faster than he ever thought possible. There was no time to waste. The storm was coming. As the first heavy rain began to pour, Obi stood in the center of the village, watching the water rise around him. The river was swelling, and the ground was becoming slick and treacherous. It was then that he saw something that made his heart freeze. The river, once a symbol of life, now seemed to pulse with a dark, ominous energy. The water churned violently, and the current became dangerously strong. Then, from the depths of the river, a familiar figure appeared. Esh, her golden hair glinting like the sun, rose from the water, her form shimmering in the storm's light. Obi's heart leapt in his chest as he rushed toward her. "Esh," he cried, his voice barely audible over the roar of the storm. Please, help us. The river is rising, and the storm is too powerful. Esh's eyes, deep and sorrowful, met his. Obi, she said, her voice as soft as the river's current but filled with sorrow, the storm is not just a test of the land. It is a test of the heart. You have learned much, but you must now show that you truly understand. It is not enough to restore the land, you must restore the balance. The river, the earth, and the people must work together, not for power, but for love and harmony. Obi looked at her, his heart heavy with guilt and realization. I took from you once. I stole from the river, from nature, and I allowed my greed to destroy what was pure. But I have learned. I know now that love, real love, must be given freely. It cannot be taken. Esh nodded, a faint smile on her lips. You have learned, Obi. But the storm is still raging. You must face it not alone, but with the villagers, with the land, and with the river. Obi looked around at the villagers, who were struggling against the storm, working tirelessly to protect their homes. He knew what he had to do. It was not just about protecting Zuba, it was about proving to Esh, and to himself, that he had truly changed. Obi gathered the villagers together, his voice ringing out over the howling wind. Listen to me, he shouted, and the villagers paused, turning toward him. We must work together, as one. We cannot fight this storm alone. The river has taught us that we are all connected. If we stand together, we can protect our village. Trust in the land, trust in the river, and trust in each other. The villagers looked at each other, their fear evident in their eyes. But slowly, one by one, they nodded. They began to form a circle, working in unity to protect their homes, to reinforce the riverbanks, and to help one another. The storm raged on, but their strength grew with each passing moment. It was no longer just about saving themselves, it was about saving their village, their home, and each other. The wind howled louder, the rain falling in sheets, but Obi felt a peace settle over him. The storm was fierce, but the villagers had come together. The river, though angry, began to calm. Esh's spirit was with them, guiding them, reminding them of the balance they had once lost, and the balance they had now found. As the storm finally passed, the sky cleared, revealing a calm, starry night. The river was still, the land quiet and peaceful. The village of Zuba had been saved, not through force, but through unity, love, and the realization that nature must be respected, not controlled. In the days that followed, Zuba slowly returned to normal. The crops grew strong, the river flowed gently, and the villagers lived in harmony with the land and the water. Obi was no longer the man who had stolen from the river. He had become a leader, not through power or wealth, but through humility and hard work. One day, as Obi stood by the river once more, Esh appeared to him, her form shimmering in the twilight. You have learned the greatest lesson of all, Obi, she said, her voice full of warmth. Love, true love, cannot be taken. It must be given freely, without expectation. It is through giving that we receive, and through unity that we find strength. Obi nodded, a deep sense of peace settling over him. I understand now, Esh. The river, the land, and the people, they are all connected. And I will never forget the lesson you've taught me. Esh smiled, her form fading with the wind. You are ready now, Obi. Keep the balance, and never forget that love is the greatest power of all. And with that, Esh vanished, leaving Obi to watch the river flow peacefully, its waters clear and full of life. Moral lesson: true strength comes not from taking, but from giving. The earth, the rivers, and the people are all connected, and it is through unity, love, and respect for nature that we find balance and peace. Greed may bring temporary success, but only love and humility can heal the land and the heart.